In the heart of the Brake family kitchen, where the air hung sweet with the scent of baking, Olivia sighed and let a stack of documents thud onto the worn oak table. Across from her, her mother Helen turned a page of a glossy fashion magazine, her still lovely profile etched with the assurance of a former local beauty queen. "Darling, what do you think of this crimson for Paris?" Helen asked, brandishing the magazine. Olivia dragged her gaze from her paperwork, mustering a thin smile. "Lovely, Mom." She had no more opinion to give. The mountain of policy renewals for Brake Insurance demanded all her focus. The agency bore her father Charles's name and the town's trust, but its engine was Olivia's quiet diligence. College had been her dream, but her father's pleading look 16 years ago had tethered her to the family desk. "Oh, Lindsay!" Helen's delighted exclamation pierced the room. She was beaming at her phone. "Her followers are up again. That last shoot really paid off. She has such an eye." Olivia offered another silent smile. Her younger sister, the family's college investment, had been in New York's fashion world for only 3 years, yet her glittering life already sparkled across social media. "Olivia, how much longer with those files?" Her father's voice carried in from the living room, where he, the trusted public face of the business, was presumably resting. "By morning, Dad," she replied, her voice frayed with fatigue. A persistent ache had settled behind her eyes, a companion to the late nights. Sacrifice was an old habit. She remembered being 12, skipping school for a week to nurse a 6-year-old Lindsay through pneumonia, her parents too busy to notice the depth of her vigil. The front door burst open. "Dad, look." Lindsay swept in, cheeks flushed, waving printed tickets like victory flags. "Paris Fashion Week. I got them." The kitchen erupted. Helen rushed to embrace her. Charles's newspaper was forgotten, a broad smile on his face. "There are 3, Lindsay announced. 1 for me, and 2 for you." As cheers filled the room, Olivia watched from her island of paperwork, a soft smile on her lips. "I wish I could go, too," she murmured. The dream of Paris, of anywhere beyond this town, a quiet ache in her chest. Helen turned. "I said, I wish I could go, too." Olivia's voice was shy, a child's whisper. A sudden, heavy silence fell. Charles cleared his throat, his tone kind but final. "Someone has to mind the agency. Liv, it's renewal season." "Exactly," Helen chimed, already turning back to Lindsay. "The business can't run without you." Lindsay nodded, her sympathy perfunctory. "And there are only 3 tickets. Sorry, Olivia." Olivia's smile stiffened, a practiced mask. "It's fine, really. Have a wonderful time." That night, as excitement over croissants and couture swirled around the dinner table, Olivia's headache sharpened, her throat burning. She swallowed 2 painkillers and slipped away early, the joyful chatter chasing her up the stairs. By morning, a fever had taken root, a dry fire in her veins. Still, she went to the office, her vision swimming as she processed the final documents. Dusk found her swaying on her feet at home, the house now a chaos of open suitcases and packing lists. "Olivia, does this dress work?" Lindsay spun, holding up a sequined gown. Through a haze of pain, Olivia nodded. "Beautiful. Perfect. Oh, and these need your magic touch. Can you get them to the client? I'll email the details from Paris." Lindsay pressed a fresh stack of papers into Olivia's arms. Olivia swayed, catching herself against the wall. "Are you all right?" Helen asked, a flicker of concern vanishing as she checked her watch. "Just a cold, I think." "Poor thing. Drink some tea. You'll be right by tomorrow." And Helen returned to folding a silk blouse. Alone in her room later, Olivia shook with chills, her skin burning. Something was deeply wrong, a weight crushing her chest with every breath. But to speak would be a ripple in their perfect pond. So she swallowed the fear and crawled into bed. On the eve of their departure, through the fever's fog, Olivia completed the final documents and Lindsay's task. As her family laughed over travel guides, a painful new clarity cut through her delirium. She was the foundation they built their dreams upon, and foundations are meant to be unseen. The morning of the trip, Olivia's world had narrowed to pain. Her head pounded, her lungs screamed with each shallow gasp. She clung to the banister, descending into a living room bright with anticipation. "Mom?" Her voice was a ragged thread. Helen, zipping a pastel suitcase, glanced over. You're up. You still look peaky. Her tone held the impatience of a ticking clock. I need hospital. Olivia gasped, sweat beading on her pale forehead as she slumped against the wall. Lindsay descended, phone in hand, and stopped short. You're not contagious, are you? She plucked a mask from her pocket and fastened it. Charles appeared from the entryway. Taxi's here. We'll miss our flight. His eyes finally found Olivia. Liv, what's... Dad, please. She stumbled forward, hand outstretched. The taxi horn blared outside. Charles, now, Helen cried, her grip tightening on her suitcase handle. She met Olivia's pleading gaze, and a cold, defensive smile touched her lips. We're leaving for France. Figure it out. The words hung, brutal and final. Olivia's knees buckled. She crumpled to the floor. Lindsay sighed, a sound of profound irritation. Don't ruin this for us. Bye, Liv. She wheeled her suitcase toward the door. Charles stood torn, anguish flashing across his face. The good medicine is on the fridge. Sweetheart, I'll take you to the doctor when we're back. With one last conflicted glance, he followed his wife and daughter out. The door clicked shut. The sound of cheerful voices and a departing taxi engine faded away. Help! Olivia's whisper was lost in the empty house. Her phone glinted on the table, a mile out of reach. Each attempt to move stabbed fire through her chest. She curled on the cold floor, consciousness ebbing. The only sound was the indifferent tick of the clock. The light shifted, shadows lengthening. Time passed, merciless, in the silent house. Why? The unanswered question was her last thought as darkness swallowed her. 2 days later, the doorbell rang through the silence. Then, a key turned. Olivia? We had plans. Jessica's voice called out, then sharpened into a scream. Olivia. The world returned in fragments, a desperate face, blaring sirens, the stark white of a ceiling. An IV trailed from her arm. An oxygen mask clung to her face. A doctor's murmured words. Risk of fluid in the lungs. Olivia? Jessica's face swam into view, etched with worry and a simmering anger. Thank God. My family? Olivia rasped. Jessica's expression darkened. In France, I called them. But, she hesitated, then guiltily showed Olivia her phone. On the screen was a post, a photo of Olivia pale in the hospital bed, an oxygen mask over her face. The caption was stark. The comments a torrent of outrage. I'm sorry. It was too cruel. The whole town knows now. Olivia turned her head, a slow, weary motion. She felt no anger, only a hollow, infinite sadness. The door opened, and a woman with elegant silver hair swept in, her presence filling the sterile room. It was her grandmother, Elizabeth. She rushed to the bedside, her cool hand clasping Olivia's. Jessica called me. I came as soon as I could. Elizabeth's eyes glistened. I've been trying your mother. That foolish girl. Grandma, Olivia whispered, tears finally spilling over. Elizabeth smoothed her hair, her touch a balm. Your mother, she had a childhood with little warmth. I was always working, trying to keep us afloat. I failed to give her the love she needed. And now, her voice broke, heavy with a legacy of absence. Now she doesn't know how to give it either. In that quiet hospital room, with her steadfast friend and her grieving grandmother beside her, Olivia listened. The story of her own neglect was being rewritten, not as her fault, but as a sad, inherited echo. And for the first time, the weight on her chest began to lift, making room not just for air, but for a new and different kind of strength. The loneliness had always been there, a quiet hum beneath the surface of Olivia's life. Now, seeing it reflected in her grandmother's regretful eyes, it gained a name and a history. But that's no excuse for Helen, Elizabeth said, her voice firming with conviction. If anything, knowing that ache should have made her fiercely determined that you never felt it. She let out a long, weary sigh, the sound holding generations of missed connections. Olivia listened, and a sliver of understanding, intellectual, cold, slipped into place regarding her mother's chill. Yet it did nothing to thaw the frozen core of betrayal in her own chest. Understanding was not absolution. The low murmur of the hospital room TV provided a bleak backdrop. A local news anchor's voice, crisp with disapproval, sliced through the quiet. Growing outrage surrounding the president of Brake Insurance, who, along with his family, departed for a Paris vacation while his adult daughter was left seriously ill at home. The story, amplified on social media, has sparked a community-wide debate on familial duty. We've learned multiple clients have now terminated their policies. Elizabeth swiftly muted the set. Pay that no mind. Your healing is all that matters. Olivia nodded, but a familiar, unwelcome pang tightened her chest, a reflex of concern for the business she'd built. For the family name now tarnished, the habit of putting them first died hard. But the story had its own momentum. Jessica's post became a spark in dry tinder, leaping from local forums to national commentary. The breaks were now a cautionary tale. In a Parisian cafe, Lindsay's phone first buzzed, then shrieked with notifications, a torrent of fury from strangers. Mom, Dad, something's wrong. Lindsay's hand trembled as she thrust the screen forward. The glamour of the city outside the window suddenly seemed cheap, a painted backdrop to a crumbling reality. Helen's face went ashen. Charles scanned the headlines, his confident facade cracking like plaster. Olivia's in the hospital? Charles's voice was thin with shock. A frantic call to the office voicemail confirmed the worst, a chorus of angry cancellations. We go back. Now. The decision was made not in concern, but in panic. The dream trip ended not with a sigh of contentment, but with the cold sweat of salvage. Back at the hospital, a fragile peace had settled around Olivia. Elizabeth was a constant, steady presence. Jessica, a fierce protector. In their care, Olivia learned, slowly, what it felt like to be a priority. You are a remarkable woman, Olivia, Elizabeth said one afternoon, her knitting needles clicking a gentle rhythm. Your patience was a gift they squandered. Now, that generosity must turn inward. This life is yours to design. Olivia's eyes welled. It was the first time her worth had been named aloud, separated from what she could do for others. The hurried, dissonant footsteps in the hall shattered the calm. Charles, Helen, and Lindsay appeared at the door of room 304, looking like refugees from their own lives, faces drawn with jet lag and dread, clothes rumpled from travel. Helen, in particular, seemed unraveled, her usual composure replaced by a wild-eyed distress. The nurse's direction was given with a faintly accusatory chill. Charles knocked, a timid sound, and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted them was a still life of consequence. Olivia, pale against the pillows, the oxygen mask a stark reminder of their absence. Elizabeth, a regal, furious sentinel at her side, holding Olivia's hand. Her gaze, when it landed on them, could have frozen the room. You've decided to return, Elizabeth stated, her voice dangerously quiet. Olivia merely opened her eyes, her expression a placid lake that gave back nothing of their turmoil. Mother, we came as soon as we heard how serious it was, Helen began, the words tasting like the excuse they were. Elizabeth rose, a controlled storm. Olivia has been here, fighting for breath, for 4 days. You left her on the floor. You saw her, and you left. Charles tried to step toward the bed. Stay where you are, Elizabeth commanded, her hand a barrier. Do you have the slightest comprehension of what you've done? Lindsay pressed herself against the wall, a choked sob escaping. The weight of the silence was punitive. Elizabeth, please. Charles tried. She had severe pneumonia. Elizabeth cut through, each word a hammer blow. She nearly died. If not for Jessica, you would have flown home to plan a funeral. The statement landed with physical force. Helen collapsed into a chair as if her bones had dissolved. Lindsay slid down the wall, weeping openly. Charles remained standing, but he seemed to shrink, his eyes locked on Olivia's fragile form. Olivia, I am so sorry, he whispered, the apology vanishing into the sterile air. Olivia said nothing. She watched the ceiling, a detached witness. The agency, Charles faltered, the practical ruin intertwining with the moral. It's collapsing. Clients are abandoning us. You said it couldn't function without you. It seems you were right. The admission was a surrender. Lindsay's work, Helen added in a hollow voice. All her contracts, gone. Her online life is nothing but hate. You authored this ruin yourselves, Elizabeth said, unmoved. You never saw the ledger of her sacrifices. She turned to Olivia, her touch gentle. When Lindsay was 6, burning up with pneumonia, who nursed her for a week? Missing school. Barely sleeping? A puzzled silence. Lindsay looked up, tears streaking her face. I don't remember. You were a child. But you. Elizabeth's eyes pinned Helen and Charles. You were the parents. It was Olivia. At 16. Who cooled her brow? Who held the cup of water? Her teacher called me. Worried about her absences. I was the one who found her at Lindsay's bedside. The revelation hung in the air, a foundational truth they had all willfully ignored. Lindsay stared at her sister, seeing a lifetime of unseen labor. And now, Elizabeth finished, her wrath spent into a profound sadness. You did it to her again. You left her to drown in the same illness. Lindsay stumbled to the bed, reaching for Olivia's hand. I didn't know. I never let myself see. Olivia, please. I'm so sorry. Her repentance was raw, messy, real. Olivia's gaze shifted to her sister. The anger was there, but it was dwarfed by an ocean of grief. I just wanted to be seen, Olivia rasped, her voice scraping through the quiet, not as the pillar, or the tool, just as a person, as family. Lindsay pressed Olivia's hand to her forehead, her body racked with tears. Charles sank to his knees beside the bed. The proud insurance man brought low. I failed you. I don't dare ask for forgiveness. I haven't earned it. Then Helen stood, her voice a fragile thread. I was jealous of you. The confession, once unthinkable, now hung plainly between them. You were so capable, so needed. You had a strength I never did. And instead of cherishing it, I resented it. But to leave you, her voice broke completely. There is no justification. I failed as a mother. I failed as a human being. The three of them, father, mother, sister, huddled around Olivia's bed, a broken constellation seeking gravity. Elizabeth observed, her sternness softening a degree. The first, fragile fissure of change had appeared. Olivia, Elizabeth said softly, forgiveness is your choice alone. But remember, it is not amnesia. It is seeing the wound clearly, and choosing to heal despite its scar. Olivia gave a slow, slight nod. The hurt was a deep sediment within her, but in the raw honesty of their remorse, she felt the faintest stirring of something else, a possibility. 6 months later, in the amber light of an autumn evening, Olivia collected the mail from the porch of Elizabeth's cozy cottage. The air was crisp, clear. Anything of note? Elizabeth called from within. Just the usual, Olivia replied, settling onto the sofa. Peace had become a tangible presence here. Her health had steadily returned, and with it, a new steadiness of spirit. The scars were tender, but they were hers, and they no longer defined her. The fallout had been severe, but it had forged a brutal honesty. Charles's agency was a shadow of its former self, downsized to a modest office. He worked alone now, his approach stripped of pretense, focused on slow, honest rebuilding. His weekly visits to Olivia were penitent, consultative. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. Lindsay had left the glittering world of fashion behind. She now spent her days at a youth community center, channeling her energy into guiding teenagers navigating family strife. Her Wednesday lunches with Olivia were tentative bridges, carefully crossed. Helen's transformation was the most profound. She engaged in serious therapy, confronting the ghost of her own neglected childhood and the warped envy it bred. She joined a mother's circle, learning to listen and to share her failings. Their monthly teas with Olivia were often steeped in difficult silence, but they were a commitment, a promise to show up. Your father called, Elizabeth mentioned, setting her knitting aside. He'd like to stop by this evening. Olivia gazed out at the gathering dusk, feeling the complex weave of her emotions, lingering hurt, cautious hope. That night, Charles arrived with a small, worn velvet box. Inside rested her grandfather's vintage wristwatch. This was meant for the daughter with the strongest heart, he said, his voice thick. We were just too blind to see it was you all along. Olivia took it, her fingers tracing the inscription on the back. Tempus revelat veritatem. Time reveals truth. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips. On Christmas Eve, snow began to fall as the family gathered in Elizabeth's warm, fire-lit living room. The meal was simple, made together. Gifts were exchanged, but the most important offerings were the handwritten letters, words of gratitude and love carefully set down for Olivia. As she read them, quiet tears finally fell, not of old pain, but of a fragile, burgeoning grace. She had not forgotten. She might never fully forget, but in the earnest, imperfect efforts of her family, and within the sanctuary of her grandmother's love, she found the strength to build something new from the ruins. Outside, the snow continued its silent, patient work, blanketing the world in a soft, forgiving white, heralding not an end, but a delicate and hard-won beginning.